Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 13th episode of Concerned Dabs podcast. I am your host, KDM Kane. My co host, Will Terps, had to take the night off this evening. We'll see him again next week, hopefully. With me tonight is Kaitlin Reed. And can you please introduce yourself to
Yeah.
the people who
Hey,
are listening?
Caitlin Reed Dongholier, Tsetia Nutsan. My name is Caitlin Reed. I'm a member of the Yurok tribe in Northwestern California. I am a PhD candidate in Native American Studies, and I will be starting as an assistant professor of Native American Studies at Humboldt State University, also in Northwestern California. The subject of my dissertation research and what will become my first book looks at the environmental and cultural impacts of the cannabis industry, or what I refer to as the green rush, on my tribal territory and fellow Yurok tribal members. So I refer to it from gold rush to green rush. And so I'm trying to connect the historical and ecological dots from the gold rush to the green rush, thinking about violence against Native people, thinking about environmental destruction, thinking about prioritizing profit. So that's what I do. I'm excited to talk about my work with y'all today.
Awesome. Awesome. So, you are Yurok, and you're from the Emerald Triangle, more or less, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, I was
so
born there. I didn't grow up there. I came back as an adult, and it was um, when I had heard stories from my mom and my grandma about where we were from, like my whole life.
yeah.
I didn't start thinking about where I was from as like a place associated with weed until I went to college. I was in
Uh,
a dorm room in New York, and somebody asked me where I was from, and I said, "Well, I'm from Humboldt County," and their eyes lit up because they were so excited. They
oh
thought I was
yeah,
going to have like the supply, and I was like,
yeah,
"Wow, how interesting is it that 3,000 miles away?" People are assuming like this agricultural product like is going to make it there first off, and it was known so well for its cannabis.
yeah, yeah. The name rings bells. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, I gotta tell this story.
Oh,
I
please.
think I think I was like a sophomore or a junior in high school, and we had this math teacher named Mr. Brown, and he was the coolest cat ever. And it was like algebra 2 or something, and he had some sort of formula that he wanted us to solve a problem with, and I was blazed. Like me and my buddy in class would smoke before class in the morning, and it was the first class of the day. And I think he could tell, but he knew I'd pay attention. You know what I mean? And so this time I wasn't paying attention. I was just staring out the window. And he asked someone else about the formula before that, and then he says, "Jonathan," I'm like, "What's up?" And he goes, "Can you use this formula to apply to the situation if you had a pound of weed from Reseda, California?" And I was like, "Where's Reseda, California?" You know what I mean? And he said Humboldt County. And I was like, "Ooh." And I knew what it was worth on my res, you know what I mean? And so you just plug in certain parts of what you know about it and the equation comes out, and it's just I was like, "Damn." And he goes, "You're correct." And I was like, "Man," like it just made so much sense to me, and I was like, "Man, he was a cool cat." And
Mm-hmm.
I think he was from there too. And
Okay.
so he just knew I was a stoner kid who was still pretty smart in school, so
Right.
he got me to tune in after that, and
Right.
like
Yeah. So Humboldt County gets remembered as this place where weed is grown and like not a place where settler violence occurred or where indigenous people have lived for 10,000 years, right? Like weed kind of
yeah,
encapsulates its identity in a lot of ways, which I think masks many of the problems that are going on in our community.
word. Yeah, what was that? There was like a Netflix movie my cousin told me to watch, that Murder
Yeah.
Mountain or something.
Yeah.
Some
Yeah.
kid
The
on the
HS
pencil
Humboldt
got
State.
smoked or something.
Yeah. Humboldt State University actually had a panel called The Other Side of Murder Mountain.
Ah,
And they were a lot of like the growers in Humboldt County came out and were really critical of that documentary, and they didn't like it because they're like,
ah,
this is depicting our industry like in a way we don't like, and like we're a community and we help the community. But I will say I was at Dartmouth at the time, so I had to watch it online live. so I couldn't be there. But nobody talked about the water issue. Nobody talked about protecting fish. Like it
Yeah,
was that was eerily missing from the conversation. Like a lot of growers in Humboldt, because like with the back to the land movement and hippies, like people think about cannabis as something that's very eco-friendly, and
yeah,
it's kind of associated with environmentalism in a lot of people's minds. And so
yeah.
there's kind of this blindness to the environmental problems it's actually creating.
Well, that's one thing when I was reading your paper, I was just like, at first, I'm like, man, I'm like, not everybody's growing like that. You know what I mean? Like, there's a
Mhm.
lot of no-till growers who like you use way less water and no nutrients. And
Yeah.
I myself as a cannabis producer, that was my game too. The first couple of years I was following another guy and learning from him, and then afterwards I made the decision to not do that,
Hmm.
to make my own soil from scratch that's organic and not feeding it any bottled nutrients, no nothing. I would brew compost tea with air and water and some nutrients in a bag, and not
Yeah.
bottled newts. It's like the stuff that I made my soil with. I put worm
Right.
castings and stuff in there and bubble it, and that was it. Tea and water. And the other thing too is like I would, after the first couple years, I'd do everything in pots instead of the ground. But even like the no-till growers, like they want to disturb the environment as least as they can because they want their plants to be able to communicate with the environment through the mycorrhizal fungi and all that. So, like,
Yeah.
that's I didn't see any of that in your paper, so I was like, I don't want to like be totally against what you're saying, but there are other methods of
Oh, you froze
production.
up a little bit on me.
Oh, my bad. There are other methods of production that are not harmful to the environment. Is
Yeah, so I will be the first to admit I don't know a lot about the production process, and to say grower as one distinct category is kind of misleading. It's not a
Yeah,
homogenous group. Like
yeah,
you have people who are
Like Indians too, man.
right, exactly. And
I
so like
yeah.
you do have you do have those people who are very interested in conserving water and using only organic materials. When I've talked to those growers, they tend to be very frustrated with the industry because they feel like they're in the minority there.
They are.
Exactly. And so
They yeah. I
I'm not
am,
critiquing every grower.
girl, I am. Like, I respect other
Exactly.
homies too, but it's just like they say the same, like, "You don't use anything? No bloom? No nothing?" I'm like, "Nah, man."
Yeah.
And there's people who take it a step further than I do, and they don't use any tea. You know what I mean? It's just water only. Like the guy that
Mm,
we had this guy on episode 2, his name is Joshua Steensland, and he is no-till indoor, so he uses this method inside with
okay.
lights to where he just makes the bed of soil once, and then he plants companion plants with the cannabis and just feeds it water, and that's it.
Yeah.
And when he was on the show, he was on, like, the 4th year, I think, like, the 11th or 12th cycle on the beds that he had at his house, and I got to sample, I think, one of the 3rd or 4th batches, and it was fire! You know what I mean? With no nutrients, no nothing, and so
Yeah.
I I am impressed with stuff like that, and I try to follow guys like that and have them on my show. But
Right.
there's also other guys that grow conventionally too with nutrients, and I think that's fine. The issue that I have with is guys who are growing outside in the ground and pouring nutrients on their plants. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
that's
It's like
primarily what we're getting on our
yeah,
reservation.
and yeah, and that's when I was reading your paper, like, I'm mad about this too. Like, at first, I was just like, "Man, she's kinda shitting on cannabis," and it's like, you're not. You're shitting on a certain part of it, which I think
Right.
is wrong
And
too. Like,
so
you but and it's not just cannabis either is what I wanted to say either. Like, before
right.
we went live, I was talking about this with you for a little bit. Every other industry pours shit tons of nitrogen on their fields to feed
Yeah.
their plants when they're in veg throughout the season, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
all of that runs off into the rivers, and all of that is bad for the pH. It makes algae bloom. Like,
Right.
it's really bad for the environment. And so cannabis, is contributing to that, of course, I'm sure in your area a lot. but
Right.
it's
And so I think it's the way you think about the plant and the way you frame the problems. Like indigenous
yeah,
peoples, we have relationships with plants, right? Like
dude,
we
yeah,
understand them as things with
yeah,
agency, and
yeah,
we know that there's like we have to respect them and we have to use protocol. Like within the Western frame set or framework that's like guided by profit, cannabis is only a commodity, right? And so like you can never make enough money. And that's where the problems kind of run in. Like one grower put it as you can either grow medicine or you can grow poison. And so we
yeah.
have a mixture of both, right?
I agree. Yeah, yeah. Like I moved here to Phoenix in 2018, right? And coming from Oregon, like, dude, like my game is tight and I'm super clean, fresh, organic, like no none of that. And coming down here, there's not even a lab test required other than potency.
Oh
And
wow.
like no pesticide test, no mold test, no nothing. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, man. So even buying from the store, which as a medical patient I am supposed to assume is a safe place,
Yeah,
it's not.
right.
Like I assume everything is dirty, you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
that law changed this summer. So starting August 27th, dispensaries are going to be required to have a residual pesticide test and a mold test, which I think is dope.
Yeah.
But I mean, policing that many businesses to get them into compliance and everything, I don't think they'll start writing tickets for non-compliance for at least a year or two. So
Yeah.
I'm still not gonna trust anything until then. But it's like in Oregon, there were companies that branded themselves off that. It's like, no, there's no newts, you know what I mean? This is no-till, sun-grown. Like, my guy Jackson, we had him on the first episode, he owns Natural Wonders, he's enrolled Nez Perce like I am. He's my bro, I worked for him for, like, a year out there in Portland, he's
Mhm.
really good peeps, and I wish I could have him on this show to talk to you too because, like, he's super smart and educated also, but he has this farm called, Green Source Gardens on his shelf,
Yeah.
and they're no-till outdoor, like, use way less water, they have their own breeding program, it's super organic, and it's
Yeah.
not causing anything harmful to the environment, and that's how they brand themselves, you know? They're like,
Yeah.
we're in the Southern Oregon because 'cause they're a little bit north of where you guys are at, I think,
Yeah.
and, you know, they're hippies. I don't think they're indigenous people, but they're good people, and they want to be not causing harm to the environment. They want to
Yeah.
be stewards of the land and be responsible as businessmen too. You know,
Right.
so I
Yeah, so
think
one of our problems in Humboldt County is that a lot of people have been involved with the cannabis industry for many decades now, right? And they want to figure out a way to do it environmentally friendly. But at some base level, you've got to look at the geography of the place and think about the historical context of why we grew weed in Humboldt County. It was because of federal prohibition. And so it was people going up into the hills where they couldn't get caught by camp, right?
yeah,
Or like
yeah,
Reagan's drug raid law enforcement dogs, right?
yeah,
Um, what the geography of that place is not conducive to agriculture. It's heavily forested. It's really steep. It has a lot of really biologically sensitive watersheds. And so the reason we grow weed there isn't because it's a great place to grow weed. It's because
yeah.
federal policies push people up there. And it's
Word.
actually at
Well,
some sort of base level, like Humboldt County is never going to be the perfect place to grow, but it's what people think about when they think about Humboldt County.
yeah. Well, like I would like counter that with certain strains that are like indica are land raised from mountainous regions like that in Afghanistan. And
Mhm.
so if you put those strains in places like that, they'll do really good, but you are correct, like not on the scale of 1,000 plants
Right. Yeah,
pulling
because they're
from
like they have to clear cut to do it.
well, dude, and then pulling water from a small stream, you know what I mean, for that
Yeah,
many
we've had
plants.
whole tributaries dry up.
Yeah, and it's I used to work in fisheries for my tribe for
Mhm.
a lot of
Oh,
years. So
cool.
I all you need is a water pump with, you put a screen on one end and put a hose on the other, and you can suck water from
Yeah.
wherever. And so it's
Yeah, I got interested in this research when I was working for my tribe too. I was working for our and we would work a lot with
Oh,
fisheries.
wait, you were working for what? Your audio cut out for 1 second
Oh,
there.
I'm sorry. I was working for the Yurok Tribe Environmental Program.
Oh, okay.
So I was working for my tribe too, and that was like when I started seeing these problems and like water getting sucked up, and like fisheries was really concerned. And I was like, shit, this is important. Like weed is blowing up around the world. Like
Yeah.
we need to know what's that the what it's doing to our fish is like the real reason. Like I got into this project, and then like I just started peeling back the layers, and I was like, wow, there's a lot more to this.
Yeah. And, like, that's one thing too is, drawing attention to it like you're doing, I feel like is good, like, raising
Hmm.
awareness, but also too, like, I try and promote guys that are responsible 'cause I don't like to just shit on the whole
Yeah,
like, "Yeah, weed outside is bad because 'cause I'm an outdoor grower too, and I'm like, "Nah, bro, like, I use way less water than anyone else because I grow this way," you know what I mean?
yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
no, I think it's super important to kind of put those folks in a position to speak to the larger growing community because like I don't grow. Like I don't
yeah.
I've never grown any sort of plants in my life. Like nobody's going to listen to me about sustainable practice because I don't know what I'm doing. Right? And so it's like people who are doing it every single day. Those are the people who need to be talking about why it's bad to like put something in the water, right? Um
Yeah.
like those people like I have leeway in like universities and stuff with other academics, but like we need to be talking to the people actually growing weed every single day, you know?
Well,
It's like,
yeah, and it's like there's guys who are conventional growers too, like they grow in a pot with soil or hydro and they pour nutrients in there. And it's like, yeah, that's cool. It's just going to the plant, but I don't think any of those guys put that soil in their garbage can and send it to the dump. You know what I mean?
yeah,
They go and put it somewhere on under a fruit tree or something, and it's like there's still leftover nitrogen and all kinds of chemicals still in that soil that are still gonna
yeah,
all run into the environment. And like I frown upon hydro growers too, because I'm like, yeah, that's cool that you can increase your yield by 30 to 50% by growing with that method, but it doesn't smell or taste the same as soil. And
mhm.
it's pretty much all like you can taste it, man. Like it doesn't one thing too, I have this theory on Panda Express. I feel like their vegetables are grown hydro.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I'm like, man, these are plain Jane. Like they're just colorful and that's it. And that's
Mhm.
why people like to grow hydro cannabis too, is it
Right.
has mass bag appeal. It's like you can keep it that light green, almost yellow color, and
Yeah.
it
Right? Like in a lot of ways, the cannabis industry mirrors like the food industry. You want to produce as much as
does.
possible at the lowest
Yeah,
cost and make and maximize profit. And in the
yeah,
meantime, a lot of people are getting diabetes and heart like cancer and like and people are obese and starving at the same time, right? It's
yeah,
like doing what is most cost effective usually creates a lot of societal harm.
yeah. Well, to me, like mine was pretty much the same as on cost, but just not as on volume. You know what I mean? Because
Mm,
you can produce way more, but it's just like it costs way less to just use water. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And that's why I feel like when I was trying to solicit an investor, I would always pitch it as, "Look, dude, everybody else is trying to get 1.2 million to do an indoor grow at a warehouse, and I just want 160 racks to do outdoor. Like we're gonna produce 3 times as much as those guys will in a year with one season. And when it gets competitive and it gets flooded, those guys can't bring their costs down. You know what I mean? Like they're gonna always pay for electricity on lights and AC and fans, but they're also gonna pay for bottled nutrients through their whole year, you know what I mean? And I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm not paying for any of that and I'm not hurting anything, and it was strange how difficult it was to sell that too to people who are rich, you know
Yeah,
what I
because that
mean?
doesn't read as profitable.
It doesn't at
And
all.
that's the bottom line.
I couldn't find the hippie millionaire, and it was like, "Damn, man." Like,
Mhm.
everybody had some sort of corporate job that they were able to stun on me when they showed up to the meeting. I'm like, "Okay, man, here's my little booklet with my spreadsheets," and, like, I was able to answer all questions, but I could never get that loot, so
Mhm.
I just had to deal with it and keep pushing.
Right.
Um, what was the next thing that you wanted to talk about?
Hmm.
I don't remember where I offshoot that. I don't remember where it
No
came from.
worries.
I just feel like I have to say something positive because I got to defend my guys at least,
Oh yeah.
but I
No,
agree with
I
a lot of what you're saying, you know.
yeah, no, I want this book to be read by the growing community, and I expect resistance
Yeah.
initially, because like the same thing happens within Native American studies, right? Like people who've been oblivious to the fact that Native people still exist, like they don't want to hear that their country was built on genocide and slavery, right? So
Nah, they
initially you
don't.
get the "I can't hear you" sort of thing, and I
Well,
see the
dude,
same thing when I
and
critique the cannabis industry, right?
man,
Like it's not every single grower; it's the industry as a whole and the harms that
yeah.
it's creating.
Well, like I am that Indian, Caitlin, on
Yeah.
Facebook. Like I'm always like, fuck, this is fucked up, and I have a lot of good friends who are Caucasian, you know what I mean, and who are business associates, and they probably think I'm just a piece of shit and just some racist asshole, but it's like I know you guys don't want to hear this, but it's the truth. And some of you guys are benefiting from it. And this is why. And you guys are smart enough to put that together from the post. And I guess it kind of is meant to be a little bit offensive, but man, it's just mainly
Yeah,
awareness.
well,
Like I'm not trying
like
to attack
settler
it.
colonialism is one of the biggest problems that we need to deal with. And I in the book, I try to link like settler colonialism and the cannabis industry. And so, settler colonialism has a particular orientation to land, right? They see it
Yeah,
as dead. It is not alive. It doesn't have spirit or agency. It is to be
yeah,
used for the material consumption of human beings. And if you're not making profit off of it, it's going to waste. And that's kind of the relationship we have towards land, and then it gets applied to the cannabis industry. And so like it's not just the cannabis industry, it's every single natural resource extraction industry. It's cannabis, it's walnuts, it's almonds, it's fruit,
yeah,
it's oil, it's
yeah,
everything, right? And
yeah,
so until you disrupt that bottom foundational layer of how you relate to land, nothing's going to get fixed. And so
yeah,
the cannabis industry is victim to that, as every other natural resource extraction site. And so cannabis is not alone. My critique is
yeah.
actually much, much larger, right?
Yeah, I agree. And the one thing too is people are lobbying, big money is lobbying for the law to be written as such that people cannot grow their own. Like it's like that in Washington. Everybody
Mm,
just saw legal weed and voted yes, but they didn't read the language and you couldn't grow your own.
yeah.
And in Oregon, that's why it failed so many times before it passed because the language didn't read such that you could grow your own. And now it is in Oregon, everybody can grow 4 plants. As long as you're 21, you can have 4 plants per residence, no card, no nothing.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is the best way to like
Yeah. Nobody should be buying weed, right? We should all be
no.
growing our own.
Yeah, it's like, man, you should grow your own, trade with your neighbor. Like if you have 4 plants, if you're doing it right, you can have enough at the end to make whatever kind of extracts you need. If somebody in your family is sick, like, nah, man, we can make some
Yeah.
BHO or some RSO from this CBD plant, and you'll be okay, man. You know,
Hmm.
it'll work and not
You're not
have
going
to
to
pay.
dewater entire streams.
No,
Yeah.
exactly. You know what I mean? Like the equivalent of that water is like another person living in your house for that summer,
Hmm.
taking a shower a day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or less. You know what I mean? So it's not super strenuous and it's not
Yeah.
hurting anything. But I agree, man. These huge farms that are because that's the guys that I like. I have so many homies that decided to give up because they couldn't compete against that big, and I'm one of them. You know, I'm like
Mhm.
I can't do this shit anymore. I don't
Yeah.
have the loot and I can't compete. So it's
It was
like, you know,
designed that way by the state. That
yeah,
wasn't like your failure as a cultivator. That was very intentional
yeah,
by people with money and people with power.
yeah, man. They lobbied for it. And so like my main thing is if it does go federal, I really wanted to say that people can grow at least 4 to 6 plants in their home without being in trouble. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah.
And
We like usually those laws though are like private property. Like I know one big problem, a lot of younger folk who can't afford to buy their own home, like they're having problems with access too.
yeah,
And so like it needs to be grown in community gardens. Like here in North Cal,
Yeah.
like we have for people who are food insecure. Like what about people who are medicine insecure? Like,
Yeah,
you know.
I agree, man. Cause that when it went wreck, holy shit, like the price jumped for like a year and a half. It was so expensive, and it's like if you're a medical patient and you need that on a daily basis, you can't afford that price. Like
Yeah.
that's an exorbitant price, and if you can't grow your own or have somebody grow it for you, then you're that's not good. You know, those patients need to be able to get their medicine for a fair price or for free. That's what I liked about the medical program in Oregon. Some
Mm,
growers took advantage. Like some people would be like, "Well, we'll give you an ounce a month for a year for your card," and I'm like, "Excuse me?" And they're like, "What?" I'm like, "The possession law is written for 24 ounces so that a patient can get 2 ounces per month off a crop. Like that's why they wrote it that way. You guys are taking an extra ounce per month, like just to put in your pocket." And guys who like had no response to that, I'm like, fuck you, dude. Like I'm not
mm,
telling anybody to give their card to you. Like that's not legit. You give a pound and a half every single harvest. And if somebody runs out, then you give it to them at cost because they're a patient and you are growing plants for them. You know what I mean? Anything extra, like, yeah, you can make a little bit of loot, but it's you're taking care of people, you know what I mean? And
yeah.
I feel like the rec laws are not taking care of anyone except big money. It's like if you
Right.
got a few million to throw at this, then you can survive through this whole flooded period.
Yeah.
And everybody else who quits in that few years is not going to reap the benefits when it goes federal. But
Yeah.
big money for sure is because who can if you put all your eggs in that basket, how are you going to survive for 3 or 4 years until it goes federal if
Right.
you can't sell the shit that you produced?
Right. That yeah. So it's like a rush, right?
Yeah,
And
hell
so
yeah,
like in my research, I talk about how this rush mentality is a pattern. It started with the gold rush, and when that no longer became profitable, they
yeah,
rushed timber, and then they rushed different kinds of minerals, and then they rushed fish. And we're on just like the next rush. And so like when people think this in like the boom of this industry is unique, I'm like, no, like look at our history. This has happened so many times before. It doesn't work out in the end for anyone, right? Okay. And so, cool. Well, he runs out. I have some photos I wanted to show folks. And so, yeah. So what I try to do in my research is draw connections from the gold rush to the green rush and say that this historical connection isn't just like arbitrary, like gold rush, green rush, they both have the word rush in them, but that it's the same sort of mindset and orientation to land that guides our behavior in the way that we use land and in the way we profit off of it. So I'm just going to switch my screen to show you my computer, if that's cool. Um, Oh shit. I don't know how to. Okay. Oh hey, I'm gonna show some of I'm gonna show some of the photos
okay,
that I
yeah,
have loaded.
yeah,
Sweet. So I'm gonna do my screen share here.
okay,
Uh,
yeah. So it should just display whatever's on your screen. Yeah.
Perfect. All
So
right.
yeah, dope.
So let me just so my work is focused on California, so I would love to learn more about what's going on in Oregon and Washington from y'all. But I just wanted to show you really quick where we're talking about. So this is where I'm from. This is Yurok Tribe ancestral territory. I always show these maps next to each other because this is our res.
Yep.
You can see it's a lot smaller, right? And so like I always need to remind people that processes of land dispossession are active, they're ongoing. And so this is kind of the region I'm talking about, and these are what photos will be from. And then I just want to show the overlap. Sorry, this photo's a little grainy. The Emerald Triangle here, I'm sure everybody who's watching this is familiar, but sometimes I get people who don't know what I'm talking about. And
Yeah,
so just
yeah.
kind of look at the overlap here. This northern part of California, and so we call it like ground zero of the environmental contaminants and environmental destruction from the cannabis industry. Um, I just want to say like a couple words about the gold rush because most
Yeah.
people, here, I'll take me.
Do your thing, girl. Like this is your time to talk about what you wish,
Oh,
man.
sweet. Yeah.
I don't want to shit on your research at all. It's just like, man, there's other guys doing positive things though that aren't a part of, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't
I'm
need
I'm
photos
one
for
of
that.
I'm one of those guys, so I
Yeah. So I just wanted to say like a quick blurb about the gold rush before I dive into like why I'm talking about the green rush in the way that I am.
yeah,
So like I taught classes at University of California, right? And so people getting out of high school in California, they're coming into my college classes. I ask them what they know about the gold rush, and it's like, oh, brave miners came here and made some money. That's all they know,
yeah, and that's
right?
what they got taught in school, man. Like,
Yes. And so what's really going on in California in the 1840s, 1850s, 1860s is that miners are actively slaughtering entire villages. They're like
yeah,
raping women. They are like killing Indian babies.
yep.
And they're getting together and forming militias. And so not just like the army being sent in, but like random 18-year
Guys
old,
with
20-year-old
yeah,
dudes are
guys who
going
don't
out.
swear any oath to any honor or anything, you know what I
Right.
mean? Just got guns and are coming there for gold. So
Yes,
fuck you,
exactly.
Indians. You know
And
what I
so
mean?
California is the golden state. We think of the California gold rush as what founded California. And so I argue you cannot separate that violence and that connection between resource extraction, right? Blowing up mountains for gold, like completely destroying entire streams for gold, putting mercury in the water. All of
Yep.
that is also connected to violence against indigenous people. And
Yeah,
so for me, the rush characterizes not just like, let's run to the resource and make money, right? The rush is also inherently violent against land and against indigenous people. And
yeah,
so when I hear people talk about the green rush as a California Indian, I can't help but think about the gold rush, right? And all that
yeah,
that encompassed for our people. And so I'm trying to argue that the gold rush is ongoing, not the gold rush, the rush mentality, and it just
yeah.
looks different. Instead of
And
gold, it's weed now. And they always collapse, right? Because it's predicated on profit, not on a sustainable way to survive in a place, right?
yeah,
Um, okay, so
man.
I'll show some pictures real quick.
Okay, yeah. Do your thing, girl. Do your thing.
Sweet. Okay, I got the share screen down now, I think. Okay, so these are the different parallels I draw from
Can
uh,
you yeah, yeah, full
between
screen.
Gold Rush and Green Rush in my book. And so I talk about land dispossession and Indian removal, right? Miners came in and said, this is mine now.
Yeah, man.
And
Our reservation shrank too, man, as Nez Perce like 2 or 3 times just because it's like, oh, there's gold there. Oh, there's gold there. You know what I mean? Like,
right,
let's make it smaller. Let's make it smaller.
right,
Let's make it smaller.
exactly. And
Yeah.
so we have growers coming in our, and sucks there is that we don't have jurisdiction, right? We
Yeah.
only have jurisdiction on the reservation, but most of our sacred sites are in ancestral territory, not on the reservation. And
Yeah.
so that kind of opens up a gateway for growers to come in and disrespect like the areas where our medicine people go, right? And
Yeah.
like we just don't want weed being grown there because our medicine people need those places, right?
Yeah. And I saw that too in your paper too about girls going to collect what is it what's the some kind of basket making material or
Oh
something?
yeah, we gather all sorts of stuff. We'll get hazelnut sticks and bear grass, and
Hazelnut sticks,
oh, I
yeah.
think the example you might be referring to is the I talk about this feeling of danger and violence because a lot of these growers they have guard dogs, and they're armed. Usually they have guns and stuff, and sometimes they even use booby traps.
Yeah.
Um, and if you're like accidentally stumble upon a grow, like I think I wrote in my paper, it doesn't matter if you're looking for bear grass or if you're a cop, right? You're gonna get a gun pulled on you.
Yeah.
And like thinking about land dispossession and the settler state taking away our territory, this tiny little reservation that we have left, if we can't even feel safe in our own land, like what the fuck, right?
Yeah.
Like that's not okay. And like a lot of our environmental staff go to really remote areas of the res to do like different samplings and stuff. And like they have to turn around because there's like evidence of a grow and like they don't want to get a gun pulled on them, you know?
Yeah, man. Like one of my uncles told me a story about being on firefighting crew down in California in the 80s and they were just digging a line and they happened to cross a grow and that's what happened. A guy pulled a gun on him. Like there was
Yep.
like 2 guys out there and they're just like, "Hey man, we're just trying to fight the fire." And the guy actually gave them a bunch of hash and was like, "Thank you guys. I'm sorry for doing that. You know what I mean? I'm just out here
Mhm.
trying to protect my crop. And they're like, man, we understand, man. Thanks for the medicine. Later. And I would
Yeah.
just like, huh, man, I would have been scared because, like, you can't. I don't think you can have a gun when you're out on fire crew. I'm pretty sure that's
Oh,
against the
wow.
rules. So it's like, I would have
Yeah.
been shook. Like, man, I don't care how old I am. It's like you get a gun pulled on you. It's like, motherfucker, you know.
Yep. Yeah,
That's
no, my friend Judith, she's Hoopa, and her son got shot in the head over a gram.
damn, man, that's
Yeah.
whack.
Yep.
There was a kid in Portland that used to come to the shop, Natural Wonders, that got smoked, and it wasn't a gram. That's fucked up, but it was 2 pounds, and it's like
Mm.
some kids were trying to jack him, and he wasn't having it. He got back in his car, and they shot him while he was in his car. I was just bummed out because that kid came in every week, and he was a kid, like 22,
Yep.
and it's like, man, that's
Yeah.
everybody should be able to grow their own. Then you shouldn't steal if you can make your own. Like, man,
Yeah. So that
don't do
documentary you
that.
mentioned earlier, Murder Mountain, like that kind of highlights the violence that happens in Humboldt County. The growers who came to that panel I mentioned, like they were really like kind of mad about that because they're like, we're so much more than violent. We're also like loving and stuff. But like I'm on a list serve where I get notifications every time there's like a violent incident that gets reported to the police with cannabis, and it's daily. So like
Damn.
that violence, in a lot of ways, people try to sweep it under the rug, but it is like part and parcel of it. Um,
Yeah. Well,
and
like that's and making the law such that man, some states are saying if you have a medical card, then you can't have a concealed weapon permit. And it's like, man, if somebody wants to do me harm for doing what I do, then I should be able to defend myself too. And so
Mhm.
it makes me feel uneasy because it's like,
Yeah,
am I supposed to just give a guy all my packs because he has one and I don't? Like, I got one, but I'm not supposed to bring it here, so I guess I'm out of luck.
yeah.
So it just,
Yeah, and just thinking about like safety in the industry. I don't really talk about this in the dissertation I sent you, but one of the chapters in the book is going to look at labor trafficking and sexual trafficking. Because like the gold rush, right? Like miners had a slave trade going on, right?
well,
Uh,
dude, every oil field, North Dakota, Houston, wherever.
exactly. Yes.
There's a couple strip clubs in the nearest city, and there's girls selling it, and there's guys who are selling the girls who are selling it. So
Yeah. So what I argue, like, so missing and murdered Indigenous like are often located in very like remote areas and near sites of natural resource extraction, and like that's a pattern, like a well documented pattern, and we have a very awful problem of missing people in Humboldt County, right? So we have the highest rate of missing people per capita in the state of California. Our county does. We also have one of the highest rates of Native people per capita in our state, in our county, throughout California. And so, like, I see overlap between like missing and murdered Indigenous women, right, and being trafficked in the cannabis industry. Because a lot of women go up to work in the industry to just like trim or do whatever, and then like
yeah,
they're not allowed to leave, and they're kind of like they're coerced into doing sexual labor.
man,
There
that's
are also
crazy.
stories of labor trafficking in the cannabis industry in Humboldt County where people who have escaped like have no idea where in the world they are. A lot of
Yeah,
industries like to prey on undocumented migrants because if they complain, they'll threaten to deport them. They'll also kind of mislead them. They'll be like, "Do you want to cook at a camp for 3 months?" and like mislead the fact that it's like a trespass grow and what they're doing is illegal, and then they'll hold them there at gunpoint. And so I don't really know how I'm going to like go about my research for this chapter because like I don't want to put these vulnerable
yeah,
people on blast in a public setting. But like
yeah.
I see
Well,
so many parallels between like miners
well,
enslaving Native people and like raping Native women,
well,
and sort of the labor and sexual trafficking that's going on like behind the redwood curtain. You know?
yeah. I want to express my point of view. Like, I've had multiple women on my trim cruise, and none of that shit ever went down.
Yeah.
You know what I
Oh, I'm
mean?
not like accusing you
Usually,
of sexual
well, no,
trafficking by any means.
well, no. I'm just like usually, girls would have the time in the evening and want to be hustling and making some extra loot. So like they would always show up and do work, and it didn't matter if you were a girl or a boy. It's like if you couldn't trim a pound of weed in 6 hours, then I'm not gonna call you again tomorrow. You know what I mean? So,
Mhm.
but there was one girl, and she brought her boyfriend through too, and I met her through one of my cousins. She was from the Boise area, and she was the best girl. Like she was a robot. Like she would smoke anybody, like do double their work anytime. And so that makes me sad that that's happening down in your region because it's not cool. It's like you're supposed to be able to trust each other. That's why you have these people here on your farm because nobody's gonna
Yeah.
steal or do anybody wrong. And
Right.
if
The word people use around here is potstitute.
ah
Yeah. And one of the
damn,
big
that's
problems
that's the
is that like
first
maybe
time
a
I've heard
college
that
girl.
term. I'm gonna look for
Oh,
that on IG now. Hashtag prostitute.
yeah, well, I think it's another way of like demeaning women and objectifying them and using them for their sexual labor. But one of the problems is that a lot of this is how I kind of learned about this because young women at Humboldt State University were like making materials to protect themselves. Because when you go up on the hill to like make money for a weekend or whatever, working in the cannabis industry, your cell phone doesn't work,
Word.
right? Like you are isolated. There is no way to contact anybody. And so like that's when like young women are being like put in danger. And because they go up to do the cannabis work, right? And it might be illegal. Law enforcement doesn't give a shit and they don't go look for them. Law enforcement's
Yeah.
attitude is basically like, oh, well, this young girl chose to go up to a cannabis farm. Like it's her fault. Like we're not gonna go like rescue her, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the sort of thing we're seeing. And so the cannabis industry in Humboldt County likes to talk about all the benefits it brings. Usually those are economic benefits, but they're very silent on not only like the environmental problems that are being created in our area, but also like people going missing. Like pretty much everybody I've talked to down here for my research knows somebody who's gone missing.
Yeah. That's crazy. Cause I don't. You know what I mean? Like I mean I know some people who have been kidnapped or disappeared, but not related to weed. So like it'll
Yeah,
be
that happens all
interesting
the
to
time up
read
here.
that part of your book because yeah, the I don't know, man. Like I just wouldn't I gotta my name's gotta be good wherever
Yeah,
people speak it, you know what I mean? So it's like if like I can't have any bad shit happen
right.
where it's my name on it. So
I make the argument that like if you're willing to defile land and like desecrate land, like it's not that big of a step to like exploit other people,
well,
right?
yeah. Well, man, the last year that I grew, like 2016, I was tearing shit up and my landlord shit on me and jacked me. But in 2017, it was a scramble to find a property, and the lady who we ended up renting from, she was kind of like apprehensive because the people the year before they didn't give a shit. Like they just left a bunch of holes in the ground and PVC laying everywhere. They weren't supposed to use that much water. Like
Yeah,
she didn't have a well. She had some sort of cistern system just to it was like a farmland. She grew hay and that was it. So she didn't need a lot of water. And those guys were using a shit ton. And they just
yeah,
left a huge mess and everything. And it was I had like I had to present myself really well and come with spreadsheets and pictures like this is what I did last year. I'm not going to dig any holes. I'm not going to use any PVC. I'm going to just put fence posts here so your horses can't get to them and that's it. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
she was okay with it, after that cuz it was just like, man, I'm
Yeah, so one of the parallels I draw between the gold rush and rush is the gold rush was the biggest like the biggest migration in human history. Like tens of thousands of people flocked from all over the world to like
yeah,
come mine for gold in California. And
they
so
got
we have people coming from all over the country, all over the world to come grow weed in Humboldt County. And guess what? Most of them know nothing about
yeah.
cultivating,
Fucking
right?
Chads. Chads. If Will was on the show right now, he'd be like, yeah, those fucking Chads coming out there to throw their
Yeah, but
millions away.
they're really fucking up our environment, right? So here's one story. It's kind of an extreme. So we go. I used to Operation Yurok is like this tribal eradication campaign, and then we go in and document environmental damages. So this
Yeah.
guy had got a 40-gallon drum of whatever chemical, and he's supposed to like dilute it into his spray bottle. So it's like 10% solution, 90% water, something like that.
Yeah.
This guy didn't know that. And so he just dumps his whole fucking barrel or drum into this little makeshift pond he had made with like a tarp, and like that was the water that was going down the whole mountainside, getting into all the soil, and then getting into the tributary.
Yeah,
And so
man.
like that's the sort of like people flock to Humboldt County because it's name recognition. They don't know anything about weed or growing weed. And even if they manage to make some money, it's our environment that they're destroying in the process while they figure it out.
Yeah, I
Right.
agree.
And
But
like
like
we're
like
not getting any of the benefits from that. Like we're not seeing any of the profit, like nothing like that. We're just seeing like the externalities, what they need to take from us so they can make money.
yeah, I agree. And like, man, it it makes me sad, but it gives me hope too, because there are people that can produce it without ruining the environment and
Yeah.
without taking care
Yeah,
of
like I agree with you. I think that's true. But simultaneously, I don't think we're giving enough attention, or like I think a lot of the criticism needs to come from the growing community itself, right? Because the growing
I'm
community
one of
is
those
very
guys.
like the growing community is used to like people attacking them from the outside, right? Like
Yeah.
for decades they've kind of endured that. They need to be attacked from the inside.
Well, there is, man. There's
Like,
this one guy, and I think people just keep reporting him on IG so he gets deleted because the majority, like you're saying, is evil. But this guy, his farm, they're called Dirty Arm Farms,
mhm,
and he grows in a greenhouse organically, no newts, and he turns most of his stuff into oil. And so it's like live resin, or he'll make like a weed syrup, and then he does like a CBD line too. But he's super organic, and the reason that he grows in soil organically with no newts is because it produces the best terpene profile, the smell and the taste and the flavor that you want. But when he's on IG, fuck, he shits on fools, and I can't help but to cheer him on because it's like guys will sit there and label their shit organic and it's not. And he'd be like,
mhm,
"Man, isn't that a bottle of Newts in the background of your photo right there? Like, what the fuck are you talking about organic?" And he just calls him out. And
yeah,
it's guys who fucking chads who put in all that money to invest and still don't know what they're doing, can't stand that shit. So they flag his profile and try to get him deleted like that. But
yeah,
I agree. It's very rare to see it from the inside. Most people who are like her, the fucking they're trying to stay super positive all the time. And you want to be a brand ambassador for our kind, and it's like when I ask those critical questions and they don't answer them correctly, it's we don't really want you to work here. You know what I mean? And I'm like, I okay, cool,
mhm,
it's fine. You know,
yeah.
um,
Like where I'm just like as like a Native American studies scholar, like my first and foremost priority is like protecting our fish, protecting our territory. Like, and that's what, and like I just have to deal with the facts of like what I'm sure like there are cannabis farms that are very sustainable, but that's not what we're seeing on our reservation. And
yeah,
so I feel like those issues need to be brought to light, you know?
word. And
Yeah, here I can show you some quick photos. I keep saying I'm gonna show it to you, and
yeah,
I'll do
yeah,
it now.
yeah.
Okay.
All good. Yeah, man. I'm
Okay, so
enjoying our conversation, girl. It's
yeah,
all
so
good.
this is the photo from before 2012 and after 2014.
Can you full screen it?
Oh yeah. Let me full
And
screen it for
and,
a minute.
and this is a like satellite Google view or something.
Okay, so yeah, this photo before 2012. This one's after 2014, and so that's just like an aerial view of clear cutting. And
Damn.
so, like, what happens when growers do that is like the soil dries up. It can't like sustain anything, right? You see, it impacts our waterways, and then wildlife go from like clear cut spot to clear cut spot where they like ingest poison and stuff. Here's another view of just like two grows, and so all the clear cutting that has to happen there. I wanted to show you some of the water. So this is like the sort of tank that we'll find all the time, and so it's just lined with
Wow.
tarp, and then you
That's
see
their
this pipe.
reservoir.
Yeah, and so that other side of that pipe is stuck into the creek.
Damn.
Yep. And so what a lot of them will do is instead of like applying nutrients or whatever chemical to each individual plant, they'll dump it in this here pool. And then these little
Yeah. Well,
um
they get that from big agriculture. Can you go back one photo?
yeah,
Yeah. See, like that tank. No, go back to that tank. So
Yeah,
big ag will post one of those out in the middle of their wheat field or whatever, and they'll do the same thing. They'll make, and it's supposed to be diluted, but it's a solution of
yeah,
chemical nutrients that they just feed over time.
yeah. And
And
so
like
one of the guys at the tribe,
they're
one of the
trying.
guys at the tribe told me that he's a plumber and he like goes to a lot of these abandoned sites and he's never seen one that isn't leaking water 20. And so like they're very inefficient. They're getting like the solution back into the water. And then these are the irrigation tubes. And what I say about these in my research, because you'll find these over whole mountainsides, just like they're everywhere.
Yeah,
And I have a good friend. She's Dakota and Dakota Jessa Ray Growing Thunder. And she, when Standing Rock was like in full force, she was telling me the Black Snake prophecy, right? Like
yeah,
the Lakota had this prophecy that this black snake will come across their territory and like everywhere it go, it would bring like destruction and destroy everything in its path. And when she told me that story, like obviously the big black snakes, the pipeline, but I was thinking of these little black snakes that are like sucking up our water and kind of delivering poisons everywhere. Um, I wanted to show some photos of the different chemicals that we find. I just wanted to let your viewers know there's a dead animal in one of my slides. So just like trigger warning for folks.
yeah.
Um,
All good. We
okay,
don't care. We
so
don't
we
care.
find we find a ton of rodenticides. Um, we
Wait.
also,
Rodenticide. So that
yeah, so
to
those
kill
are like rat
rats.
killers and stuff.
Yeah,
And so what they make the animal do, they don't kill the animal right away, make the animal very like dazed and like confused and slow. And so it then gets eaten by another animal. And so that toxin kind of like bioaccumulates in the next animal. And it's like working its way down the food chain, right?
word.
Some of these chemicals now come in things like bacon flavor, right? And so these animals are intentionally poisoned so that they don't disrupt crops. And a lot of the chemicals that we find are not even legal in the United States. They're manufactured in the United States, of course, but they are not like legally available. And so they're not on the list of chemicals the EPA tests for, right? Because the EPA assumes you're only using legal chemicals. And so they try to like find out which one it is on the list. And of course, it's not on the list, right? Um,
Yeah,
this hot dog is stuffed with carbamates, which is a really like lethal toxin for wildlife. And that marten was found like a couple meters away. We
well,
have
fuck.
found dead martens, dead
That yeah,
coyotes. We've found
cause
a
to
dead
me,
black bear.
an
They're
animal,
impacting snowy spotted owls, which are endangered.
cause to me, an animal that would eat meat is not an animal that would eat your plants. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, I'm saying,
animals I've seen eat my plants were deer. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like
um,
they would come and tear off a whole branch, and I'm like, you fuckers, man. Like it's
yeah. We're also seeing
like
poaching.
whatever. Damn,
We're also
really?
seeing a lot of poaching because like
Because
people are kind of
I've
trapped
never
at these
seen
places.
I've never seen a rodent eat a fucking weed plant in my life. So I
Well,
don't know.
we're finding a lot of poisoned animals at abandoned grow sites.
Word.
Yeah, there's an ecologist, Murad Gabriel. He's done most of the work on dog poison, and he mostly looks at different rodents and like weasel varieties. But just as his own curiosity, he's a deer hunter, and he's tested the liver of every single deer he's caught in the last like decade, and every single one has test positive for rodenticides.
Yeah, well, did he check for glyphosate?
I don't even know what that is.
That's Roundup. That's the most commonly used pesticide in big ag, and it's in everything. Like if you used Roundup on your weed plants, you would fail a residual pesticide test to get onto a dispensary shelf. But everything else that we buy in a grocery store, everything, everything has not undergone that same test.
Yeah,
The only thing that we buy, like the only test that anything on the shelf, even if it's labeled organic, it didn't get the product didn't get tested. They came and inspected the farm, and that was it.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
then
so we're
that,
seeing like this kind of pollution, but we're also seeing garbage. Um, People leave behind tons of garbage. There's garbage extends beyond both frames of this. It's like an episode of Hoarders in some of these abandoned sites.
and
You find a lot of petroleum products
yeah,
and like a bunch of
BHO.
different. I'm
I've
sorry,
seen
what?
BHO. I've seen some pictures where there's so many cans of butane just left out there in a
Yep.
field in an area, and it's like,
Yeah.
why did you guys even do it like this? You guys got to be junkies. If you're gonna run that much oil, like you could have done it way smarter than to waste that many cans and pay retail for it. You know what I
Yep.
mean?
And then we find a bunch of equipment. Like that was just one thing of batteries left behind, right?
Yeah.
And like these will eventually like break down and contaminate soils and stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
and some guys just leave it. Like that's the lady in 2017. She didn't want to work with me at first, but I like explained to her like I don't do any of that shit that those guys did last year. Like
yeah,
I'm not gonna mix anything up and pour it on your fucking land. Like it's
right.
gonna be all
There's one more pollution problem I got to talk about really quick because it's a big problem for our people. It's gross, so I don't have a picture.
okay.
Um, it's so a lot of people they come up to these grow sites, right, and they're there for a couple months. They don't build a latrine. They
What
have
do you
no
mean?
sort of sewer
What's a
system.
latrine? Oh, latrine.
Latrine, like a hole in the ground, right?
And they,
And
yeah.
so a lot of people are open like defecating into the streams and
Oh
like the
man,
levels of E. coli are like increasing and they're getting our tribal members sick, like deathly sick.
that
Um,
sucks,
like
man.
our and one grow site we had, it was abandoned and we had to go clean it up. There was over 100 5-gallon buckets capped with human sewage. And
That's
so
that's
like I'm like,
man,
this
that's
isn't they
crazy.
did it on our land. And so like they
Wait,
bailed. We don't know who did it. And so the
so,
obligation to clean it up is like on us. And it's
so
like,
they were gonna use that for their plants or something? How many
no, no,
buckets?
no, no. No, it was because they're living up there.
Oh, fuck, that's
Right? Like they're
crazy.
super remote. It takes like 10 hours to access a site sometimes because they're way out in the middle of nowhere.
Well, cause
Right?
my pop always told me, like, if you're out in the woods, just you got a shovel, dig a hole. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
no, they're just going in the river.
That's fucked up, man.
Yeah. And like at a large scale, right? So like a grow site with 4,000 plants, you've got a lot of workers. They're up there for a lot of months. That
Yeah,
stuff adds up, right?
yeah,
And so like human waste is a huge issue that my tribe is dealing with. And it's like we didn't ask for this settler shit to happen, right? Um,
yeah.
and so
Okay,
that's the perspective of cultivation from my tribe's perspective, right?
okay,
Like because
yeah.
these are the issues that we're dealing with, and
Well,
like the
no,
growing community isn't helping clean them up, right?
and yeah, and I can dig where you're coming from because I'm that Indian on Facebook, and I know people don't like me for it. So I'm pro cannabis and pro cultivation and pro industry and all this. So I can't be angry at you for being
Mhm.
that Indian on my show. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
it,
I'm digging it. You know what I mean? I'm like,
yeah.
man, it's
It wouldn't matter to me if it was cannabis or dairy farming, right?
well,
Like,
cause usually too, I'm just like, yeah, yeah, word, yeah, I fucking like that shit, and this is different. Like we're talking and engaging about
mhm.
aspects, and so
Yeah, no, it's a really complicated issue. There's a lot of Indians on my tribe getting
yeah,
into weed, right?
yeah,
It's not like all of us think the same way. We
no,
debate the fuck out of this at like our annual meeting.
yeah, and well, I hope that any Indians in your tribe who are into cultivation are learning about sustainable methods because like man it is a part of your culture not
Right.
every tribe farmed or cultivated, you know, a lot of tribes were just hunter gatherer, but some tribes did and they did it sustainably. They didn't
Mhm.
have chemicals to fuck
Yeah.
shit up back in the day. It's like nah man, it grows like this in nature, so we just duplicated that right here, you know.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
Yeah. No, we've been adept stewards of our land for longer than settlers can even fathom. Like we've been taking
yeah,
care of our places for 10,000 years. And so like when we talk about the rush pattern unfolding, it's because we were there and saw it happen,
well
right?
yeah, and
Like
I
we
saw.
already know the ending of this story.
Yeah, I saw this one passage in your paper too that talked about your tribe purposely setting fires so that those hazelnut sticks can grow so that they can
Yeah.
make basket. But that wasn't the only benefit. You know what I mean? It's like it helped other wildlife come to
Yeah.
some habitat
Totally.
and everything too. Like there was tribes in Oregon that also did that.
Yep. Yeah,
So
a lot of us burned. And when the Spanish missionaries showed up in California in the 1750s, they were writing in their diaries, WTF, why are these stupid Indians lighting everything on fire? Like,
yeah,
they didn't understand the complexity of our land management regimes,
yeah,
right? Like
Yeah.
they weren't as sophisticated and ecologically aware of their surroundings as we were. And so, like, when the national parks are created and the US Forest Service is created, the first thing they go and do is fire suppression. They're like, Indians, quit lighting shit on fire, right? That's why California is on fire every single summer, because the state hasn't let us burn like we're supposed to, right?
Yeah,
That's
so
why
there's
we're in this
yeah,
terrible
so
situation.
so there's way
Right?
too much tinder and it just
Yeah.
fucking goes off because it's
Bottom line, Indians know what we're talking about.
yeah, man, no doubt, no doubt. Is there any like positives from your tribe? Like is anybody like doing anything like positive that you're proud of that you want to talk about in the
Yeah, well, we've
industry?
like dramatically decreased the amount of trespass cultivation on our reservation. So,
That's good.
Operation Yurok is kind of a like
So way
innovative
way
program.
less illegal unlicensed grows going on.
Yeah, exactly. And so we're seeing less of that. Like in 2000, it was blowing up. They were like sucking all of our creeks dry. But like we've been going after them every single summer, and I think like we're making a dent. Like it's like some people are really pessimistic and they're like, it's like a drop in a bucket. But like anything we can do to protect our fish is really important, and I think the tribe is working on doing that.
Yeah. Well,
But
like
eventually, like the green rush will collapse, just like the gold rush did, and then it
I
won't be profitable to grow weed at all because Amazon and Google will be doing it. So,
yeah, I hope to get one of those Amazon weed jobs because I work for them right now.
oh yeah,
Yeah, but I actually one of those illegal huge grows. I used to DJ in a strip club for a lot of years in Portland at a few different ones. So I'd run into a lot of different characters and sometimes people knew I was a weed guy, so we'd sit down and talk for a second, but I got offered a job at one of those illegal grows, and it was in Oregon, and they had 1,000 plants, and it was out in the woods. And they're like, "You go outdoor, you know what you're doing." I'm like, "Yeah, bro. Like, here's my spreadsheet." And they were just like, "We're not doing that. We're doing this." And I'm like, I respect your guys' heart, to do such things, but I fucking been to jail for weed already, so I don't want to do anything like that. And so I settled on the property in Sherwood in 2016. I met a guy like that through the
yeah,
strip club, and it
yeah.
went okay
I
for a
think we can get
second,
more
but
creative too,
yeah,
because like
I just I wanted to be responsible and not
yeah,
illegal and not go to jail because I've already done that part. It's like that's why
right.
I'm in Oregon because I can be compliant and do my thing and not get in trouble. Like,
Yeah. And like tribes need to like diversify and like get more income. Like I get that. But I think there are other elements of the cannabis industry that we could perhaps participate in that won't like divert our water and contaminate our soil. Like what if the Yurok tribe owned its own lab to like test product for retail, right?
yeah,
Like people are paying a lot of money to get their shit tested, and then that might be a for our tribal youth to like
well,
have a job
dude,
and live at home,
yeah,
in their
and
own community. And so,
it's
like, I
weird.
think we need to get more creative about how we think about tribal participation in the cannabis industry.
Well,
Um,
and it's required. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like
exactly.
testing
And
is
then we know
required,
that like the state isn't half-assing it, and like the tribe would actually do it right.
and yeah, and it's man, that's one of the biggest lobbying bodies in cannabis. I feel like because dude, like in medical, like a compliance test as a medical grower is like $100. And it was like
Okay.
an extra 50 if you wanted the terpene profile analysis. And some guys would do that because they want to stunt. It's like, yo, check this
Yeah.
shit out. But when it went rec, I'm pretty sure that test is like 350.
Yeah.
You
It's
know what I
a lot
mean?
of growers were complaining about it. Yeah.
Dude, yeah, like it's way deeper and way more expensive. And so if there's like I think there's like 2,100 licenses in Oregon for rec
Wow. That's it.
producers. Yeah, but dude, there's like 2 million pound surplus.
Yeah.
There's gonna be like it's
Yeah.
until those.
No, there's enough. So we did an up acreage permit cap, 3,500 acres is the max that's allowed to be permitted out in Humboldt County. That is more than enough to supply all of California.
Yeah,
So like, it's not about supply for California people. It's about profit, right?
yeah. The last article I read said that there's enough supply in Oregon to last for 6 years.
Yeah.
from
But
now.
we're going to keep producing more, right? Because the
Yeah,
same framework guides everything. It
yeah,
regards like food production, right?
dude,
We waste the most
yeah,
food in the world. Like dollar stores that are filled with those dumb little like trinkets, like we still keep producing those every year. Like it's not about stuff we need. It's we'll make anything as long as it'll make a profit, and we're not thinking about the resources that it's using. It's really
yeah.
impacting all of us for the long term.
Yeah, I agree, and I feel like a lot of the smaller craft cannabis producers in Oregon would say the same thing because they really take a lot of pride in what they produce, but it doesn't matter because there's all this volume
Yep.
from all this big money. It's like, yeah, it might not be as bomb as yours, but it
Yeah.
doesn't matter because the price is going down and people don't want to pay that much anyway. So,
Yeah. As
you
long
know,
as the cannabis industry is slave to capitalist logic, it will be very flawed.
yeah, and so I try to, man, I am working class poor, more or less. Yeah, I'm an
Mhm.
educated Indian, but I still scramble before the first of the month. So I'm
Yep.
always like a budget shopper, no matter
Right.
what it is. You know what I mean? I don't want to pay more than I have to.
Yep.
But in certain cases, and especially in cannabis or even in music, if I go to a show and the guy killed that shit and I really like two or three of his songs, I'll go pay $20 for a CD.
Mhm.
Even though a CD should only be $10, it's like whatever, bro. You're asking for 20, I got you.
Yeah.
And with weed, same thing. Like there's guys on my show who I would pay more for their weed because I know I can get it cheaper in Oregon, but those guys have something really special that they put a lot of work into, and it's worth more money to me. So I would like to
Yeah.
support the work that they
Yeah.
did because I'm also an artist too. You know, I'm a musician, and it bugs me when it's fine when people stream something off of Spotify. You know, that's how most of the income comes from digital consumption. But every now and then, someone buys an album digital download from my website or off of
Yeah.
iTunes, and it's like 10 whole dollars. And I get an email, and I'm like, man, thank
Right.
you for the support. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, man, it
Mhm.
just it makes me feel good. So I feel like guys who still take pride in their work will still find a way to at least eat and hopefully more so when it goes federally legal because if they can export with no penalties then I feel like the cream will rise to the top. Like i I drink a couple beers after work but I don't get Bud Light, you know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
I want some craft beer from a local brewer and
Yeah.
something with some citrus hops because
Yeah.
to drink less and I feel better about supporting a guy who wanted to make something good as opposed to something huge, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I hear growers critique big canna all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is, man. It's
It's symbolic of a larger problem because those like capitalist production is unsustainable. Like eventually it's going to come to a crashing halt, right? Like we're going to run out of oil. Like, you know,
yeah.
it's whether we choose to like change the way we live and the way we now by choice or later with
Damn, girl.
by no
Like,
choice.
yeah. That's what like, man, that was my whole thing with the Standing Rock thing cuz I drove an electric car from like 2015 till 2018. I got rear-ended at a red light and had to slide into an old Honda after that. So I'm paying for gas now and I feel like a sucker. But for those 3 years, the only thing I paid for was tires and windshield wipers. And so when all this Standing Rock thing was going on, I'm like, those Indians are still going to put gas in their car to drive there and drive home. So it's
Yeah,
like,
well, we've become like that's also created by design, right? Like
well,
people need to get
dude,
to
well,
work,
well,
and
dude,
people
but
don't put
but
housing
but
near
there
places of employment.
is an electric alternative, and now way more so that goes the distance that nobody can complain about anything. It's like, nah, you could switch to electric and there's no issues, and Indians still won't do that, but they'll still go and and I'm like, look, it's not gonna matter. Like you're still gonna buy that shit, so why protest it? Why don't you stop buying it? And then
Well, even
the
like your
market will
electrical cars,
change.
like so much petroleum products are required to manufacture it and
Well,
like
man,
deliver it and like,
I
you know,
agree, but the like everything going like there's less if you do the math on the total amount used to create and then sustain. It's way less. You know what I mean across the board. Like it
yeah.
doesn't. It's way less
Well, no,
useful
we
because
we use
once you
petroleum
make that
products for everything. Like
like
it's a complete like revamping of our entire lifestyle.
well and that's another thing about hemp is like most plastic, anything can be
Yeah.
made from hemp, and
Yeah.
so
Hemp is awesome.
that's
Do you know
something.
why our there's a funny story when they were making the Marijuana Tax Act 37, the first piece of legislation that outlawed cannabis in the United States. Um, Harry Anslinger, right? He was director of narcotics. He was married to Andrew Mellon's niece, and Andrew Mellon was his boss, and he was the chief financial backer of DuPont. And they produced like the most nylon in the world at the time. And if hemp had been legal, a lot of DuPont's business never would have materialized. And
Yeah,
so, like, one of the large reasons behind cannabis prohibition, it was, of course, like race based as well, but like it was also to prevent competition for the nylon industry and DuPont specifically. Um,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
hell
Yeah,
yeah.
no, hemp's awesome. I think my tribe's going to get involved in hemp.
Well, man,
Maybe. We're still talking about it.
I want my tribe to get involved in hemp and cannabis and everything. Like I I try not to shit on my leadership too much, but most times I feel like they don't represent me. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
it's fine. That's why I don't live there. You know, I'm out here trying to find my way and do my own thing in business. But I agree. And with the plastic stuff too, I want to see more clothes made from hemp and cotton. I read
Yeah.
an article that said Levi's has a cotton and hemp blend that they're gonna come out with. But man, the plastic clothes, and it's always like the cool technology to if you're sweating, it'll keep you cooler. Like it's all
Mm-hmm.
made with plastic and it smells.
Yeah.
Like it smells a certain way. No matter if it's hot or if it's cold, it's like it's because it's
Yeah.
made out of plastic, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I feel like even on my skin, I'm like, those shirts always make me itch a little bit, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it just doesn't feel safe. And I feel like something made from hemp and cotton, because I see cotton fields down here too when I'm driving around. I'm like, man, it
Yeah.
makes me feel safer wearing something that's made from that, even though it was probably sprayed with pesticides and everything, unless it's labeled
Yeah.
organic. But at
Probably.
least it wasn't chemically produced and shredded into fibers and then made into a material, for me to wear on
Yeah.
my skin.
For sure.
Yeah. What else do you want to talk about? Do you want to plug your social media or anything? Do we have any listeners on YouTube, you guys?
I don't actually have social media.
Oh, you don't? Just
I got
Facebook? Just
Facebook, but that's just for like not to
yeah, you don't
people
want to
follow
have a
me. We
bunch of
call it
people.
Indian Book.
Yeah.
And that's
I
just to
stay in
see the
touch with.
crazy drama that's going down on the weekends. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of family too. I don't have their number, but they're my friend on Facebook.
Yeah.
So if I need to call them, it's like, yo, can I call you? It's like, yeah, here's my
Yeah.
number.
I never jumped on the Twitter, sadly. Well,
Nope.
not sadly. I'm very glad I didn't. It
Yeah, I
seems like a
used
lot of work. I don't know.
it
Like I'm
is.
busy.
Girl, I'm telling you, like we have a Facebook, an IG, a Snapchat, and a Twitter for Concerned Dads podcast. And dude, I'm just like every day, I'm like, what can I? It is. It's a job, and I'm also a musician as Katie Kane, so it's just
Yeah.
like, man, like there's not. I can't just do that all day, I still
Yeah.
have to go to work, so it's like, man,
Right.
I try
I'm
to
tired
share
enough just
stuff.
keeping my own shit together. I don't need to curate
Yeah,
an
man.
present.
Same. I try
Yeah, it's tiring.
Yeah, I try to dedicate my energy towards this Sunday night broadcast and
Yeah,
and
for
hope and
sure.
hope that
No, that's
people
a nice
tune
way to
into
spend
that.
your night before your week starts. I like that.
Dude,
I'll just one thing I will say. I'm hoping to have this. So this like the report I gave you is like infantile stages of what I want to produce, and it's a very rough draft. But I'm hoping my book, which will be called "From Gold Rush to Green Rush: California Cannabis and California Indians," um, will be available by like 2022 at the very latest. Hopefully, so like
okay.
within the next 2 years, if any of your audience members are interested, they can keep their eye out for my book.
Oh, no doubt. I hope that we can put that in the description or something, Mitchell. Hopefully we can rewind that and put that
Yeah.
word for word in the description so that if somebody does stumble upon it, then
Yeah. Well,
they can look for
I
that.
still gotta finish writing
Well,
it.
because okay. So before we go, can I ask you some questions about that? Because I read books.
Yes, please.
Like I anybody who's on my show who I feel like has a bunch of dope info. Like we had one eye, he's a breeder from Oregon that bred the dog walker OG. He's got game and he's a super nice guy. I told him he's got to write a book, you know.
Yeah.
And then Joshua Steensland, he said he's working on one too. So I'm like, bro,
Yeah.
let me know when it comes out. I will buy
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. No,
About it.
it's. I
So
can't wait
same
till I'm
same
just
to
done with
you.
it. You know.
Same to you, Caitlin. Like what's the process like? Is it mostly a research thing and do you have an editor and do you have a publisher in mind?
So I've been.
Business
I'm kind of
wise,
shopping
anything
around with
whatsoever.
publishers now.
Okay.
I just met with the University of Washington Press when I was
Uh,
in New Zealand a couple weeks ago, and I really liked them. It's really important for me to have an editor that I like, you know, because like you have to talk to them a lot. Like if they're boring, you know, it's like important to have a good relationship with folks.
yeah.
So I'm thinking of University of Washington Press. So basically, what happens is that my dissertation needs to be completely like revised. I need to go back to the field. I need to do more research, ask different questions, and read more stuff.
Yeah.
And so
If you need any
over the
tips,
next 2 years,
holler at
I'll
your
be.
boy.
Hmm?
If you need any tips, holler at your boy.
Okay, yes, for sure.
Yeah.
And so this year I'll be putting together my proposal and hopefully be getting a contract, whatever publisher I choose, and then I'll be working with the press over like the next year and a half, 2 years. And so like this is also, you know, I'm up for tenure, so I gotta be writing, I gotta be getting some publishing out.
Yeah.
And so hopefully my first book will be done within like the second year of my faculty position, but if I get it done in the third year, I won't beat myself up too much. It's a lot of
No.
work, you know.
Yeah. Well, that's very cool. I dig your ambition, girl.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, man, it's inspiring, especially being an educated Indian, like it's
Yeah.
sometimes
Yeah, I'm
sometimes
I'm super excited. Like my new job at Humboldt State starts next month and I'll be getting to like mentor native students. I'll be teaching the introduction to native studies class. I'll be teaching native history. Uh, so it'll be sweet to like kind of bring in cannabis into these classes that kids probably aren't expecting to talk about weed in, you know?
yeah, man, exactly. I'm interested to hear some of the kids' perspective because some of them got to be from around there and have some
Yep.
experience with
A
it
lot of
too.
them are.
Yeah, that'll be. That sounds like a pretty sick job, Caitlin.
Yep. We'll have some fun conversations in class.
Yeah, man. Well, this has
Yeah.
been
Sorry I'm
a
getting so dark. The sun's going down and my
oh
light's not so
no,
good.
no, it's cool, man. Like we're not tripping.
Okay,
It's
sweet.
been a fun conversation on the podcast, man.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. I was really excited when you asked.
Yeah, shout out to Mitchell and shout out to Rachel, man. Like that's
Yeah.
how
Hey,
we made this
Rachel. I
happen,
wonder
man.
if she's watching. I hope so. Hi,
Yeah.
Pio Pio.
Is there anything else you want to listen to, or I mean, talk about?
I feel like we've covered most of the aspects of my research. I won't bog you down in like boring laws and stuff,
No
but
doubt. No doubt.
um,
Well,
yeah, I just think we, like every single industry in the United States, like people are exploiting the environment, and we need to talk about that.
I
And so I think a lot of my students who are frequent consumers of cannabis, like they have no idea that this shit is going down, right?
yeah,
And like
yeah, yeah.
they're
That's
all like 90% of the time they're pissed off and they want it to stop, right?
yeah.
So that's why we need to talk about it like all the time.
Yeah, no doubt. I agree. Dialogue is important. That's why we're doing the podcast. These conversations are not being had on the news or anywhere
Right.
in mainstream media, so we got to do it ourselves, and hopefully people can tune in. If it's
Yeah.
not live, they can still catch it after the fact. So
Yeah. Yeah, want to
that's
know something crazy? I was at the North American Cannabis Summit in LA this past January. There were like 500 different panels for folks to present their research. There was only two on the environment. That
damn,
was it. Yeah.
damn. Well, it's good. Way to represent that perspective, girl.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I had a blast talking with you.
Yeah, man. Hopefully we can do a follow-up interview with you, maybe like sometime after the first of the year and see how that job's going and
Oh, for
see
sure. That'd
how
be
the
awesome.
research. Maybe you'll have a publisher by then and report some
Yeah.
news on that.
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you coming on the show, Caitlin. It's been an honor interviewing you, and I'm proud of you getting your research done, and then also pursuing the book, and landing that job. It's
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
Yeah. So that's the end of the episode, folks. I'm gonna go ahead and do my outro dance right now. This was the 13th episode of Concerned Dabs podcast. I was your host, KDM Kane. My co-host Will Terps was missing, but he'll be back next week. My guest was Kaitlin Reed from Humboldt State University. I got to give a shout out to my guys in production, Mitchell Wilson and Jesse Curry. This has been a Main Node and Joseph Street Enterprise production.